As a confidence coach in Calgary who works with businesses and individuals, I have seen that confidence looks different for everyone. In this podcast, we explore confidence through the eyes of our diverse community, redefining it one conversation at a time. Welcome to Confidence Redefined. I'm your host, Alyssa McMasters. This podcast is designed for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. Always consult with relevant experts or professionals for personalized guidance. In this episode, we sit down with Stacey Madden, the owner of Mindful Somatic Wellness, and an experienced somatic practitioner committed to leading you through a transformative journey of healing. Specializing in trauma-informed approaches, Stacey seamlessly integrates emotional embodiment and somatic mindfulness techniques to offer holistic support. With a sharp focus on nervous system care, she sheds light on the intricate connection between mind and body, empowering us to recognize and harness the power of our nervous system to boost confidence and well-being. Welcome, Stacey. Hi, Stacey.
Hi, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for joining me today and to talk about confidence, talk about what confidence looks like in the body. A different side of confidence than I think a lot of people talk about. Because when we think about confidence, many people think about very masculine words. Let's talk about like arrogance sometimes or assertiveness, right? We think about having to be extroverted in order to be confident. But I really wanted to bring you on today to talk about what confidence looks like in the body and how we can embody confidence in a way that some people might not have thought about before. So tell me more about somatics and somatic therapy, what you do and how you bring confidence into the body.
Yeah, great. So somatics really fundamentally means about the body. So that's kind of the Latin word is of the body. And right now you're seeing a proliferation of somatic therapies and somatic practitioners and all sorts of somatic things out there right now. And it's a huge scale of practice now at this point, which is great because like 4 years ago, I had to tell people what it meant. So the idea has really, really grown. But fundamentally, when you read anything about somatics right now, I would probably say what people are trying to communicate is that they're working with the nervous system. They're working with the nervous system within the body and how that shows up for people. Like if you do a Google search and kind of look into people's bios, you'll see that different practitioners will have different aspects, different educations and different approaches, but fundamentally what they're working with is the nervous system in the body and how that shows up.
Now, something that you talked about that was so exciting to me that really affected the way that I see confidence is the perivagal nerve theory and how that can affect our body. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Sure. Polyvagal theory is a theory kind of written by and taught by Dr. Stephen Porges, and he's a really, really lovely man. He's really sweet. And he sort of decided to unfold and introduce one of the least talked about at that point in time survival adaptations, which is freeze response. So everybody kind of knows about fight, flight, but not a lot of people talk about freeze, which is shut down or collapse. And he kind of expounded on how freeze shows up in the body through the nervous system, primarily through the vagus nerve. So vagus means wandering, and this nerve, which comes out of C8, 9, and 10, and then wanders all over your body, is consistently picking up information and sending it to your brain. It's called neuroception. So it's neurocepting information inside of your body and outside of your body, kind of like scanning everything you eat and your heart rate and what you're seeing and the temperature outside and the sounds around you and consistently picking up information. And fundamentally, from the somatic approach, what the vagus nerve is asking consistently is, am I safe or am I not safe? Is this food safe or not safe? Is the weather safe or not safe? Is that person safe or not safe? Consistently, unconsciously sending these messages to your brain. Now, these rapid fire messages go to the hypothalamus in the brain, and then your hypothalamus makes some really, really rapid decisions about, am I going to run away? Am I going to stay and fight? Am I going to shut down and freeze? Am I going to collapse and die? Or am I going to be safe and social? So the vagus nerve isn't the most important part of the nervous system. It's just a player in a symphony of information that our body's consistently picking up and mitigating and managing. But we use polyvagal theory specifically in somatic experiencing and other somatic modalities because it's so informative, because it runs everywhere in the body. So yeah, a little
That is so beautiful. And what I love about what you do is you are able to combine the science with it to really help us understand that. And a lot of conversations that we had today, we talked about how in order to be vulnerable, we have to be safe first, right? In order to be very vulnerable, we have to be in a safe space. We have to feel like we are safe and connected. And with vulnerability, we can sometimes gain that confidence because we can release that shame that we have, right? We can release the shoulds that we have. But in order to do that, we first have to feel safe. So that's why I just love the ability to work into safe and social. So today I really wanted to go through an exercise, and if you're willing to take us through an exercise of how in our daily lives we can go into that safe and social, and maybe the times that we can feel that fight or flight or freeze, and how we can mitigate that and kind of come back to that safe and social. Does that sound fun to you?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'd like to touch on, though, is that for some people, safe and social is just not available. Like, being in safe and social is not a neural platform that they've never been in it. They simply won't know what it's like. So where we would start is kind of noticing some of the bigger sensations in the body, which really is fight flight for a lot of people, is that sensation of the heart beating fast and hands moving and legs moving and rapid breath. And rather than trying to slow that down or make that be any other way, we invite it to show up slowly and carefully. And then we notice, do we arrive at safe and social, which is different than trying to make it happen. We invite safety in through the system by noticing what's there right now.
You said the word notice quite a few times. Can you explain what notice means to you and what it might mean to other people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I'm often inviting people to notice is their sensations, is noticing sensation in the system. So how do we notice sensation? If you were to take your fingers together right now, and here's a little practice that we can do together, and you just rub your fingertips together. You just do one, and you do the other. And you might notice how your fingertips feel when they rub one against the other. You might notice the pads of your fingers, how they're kind of different from finger to finger. You might notice that you can almost feel your fingerprints. If you slow down enough, you can almost feel those little whorls and divots on your finger pads. Yeah, so you're sensing. This is sensing. Now, give your hand a little shake out. Shake that out. And now rub your fingers and your thumb together again, but this time think about it. Use your descriptive brain to describe what you're feeling to yourself. Like, try to make up some sentences in your mind, like, this one's softer, this one's colder, and notice what the experience is like now. These are two different experiences for most people. You might become aware that when you're simply sensing your fingertips, your mind kind of softens, like your eyes kind of drift away. Like, you don't have to have like a laser tight focus on what you're doing when you're simply rubbing your fingers together. But the minute you start thinking about it, the operations of this change. It doesn't feel as good now. Maybe you're not even really noticing your fingertips or sensing your fingertips anymore. You're thinking about it. So the invitation to notice is to drop into sensation and get curious about it. What is that? And to notice if your thinking mind starts to interrupt the process. Because we've really confused ourselves with our thinking mind. We think we are what we think. Our brain is the most important organ according to itself.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And what I hear lots is we think, right? We think, and this is where a lot of insecurities also come from what I do in terms of my confidence coaching. I see insecurities coming from, well, I think I should be this. I think I should be that. I think I'm not good enough. I think X. But when we really think about it, and when we don't think about it, right? When we do the opposite of it, when we really feel it, is that what we're feeling? Or is that something that the world is telling us that we're supposed to feel? Is that what we're feeling? Or is that something that our body's telling us, right? And how do you discern the difference?
Yeah, what a great question. So in somatics, we really look at the three languages of the body. The first language we have is sensation. When we are born, we are sensate creatures. We're sensing everything. And you can just imagine and notice what you're feeling in your own body when I invite you to imagine what it must have been like to be a newborn. How temperature must have been so much information for a brand new little nervous system. Hunger, warmth, touch, not being touched, fabric. Imagine even how fabric lands on new skin. So when we are born, we are sensate beings. It's our first language of sensation. The second language that we develop is emotion. So we start to emote, and emotion sometimes is broken down as energy in motion, or sometimes emotion is seen as needs, signposts for needs. We develop emotions and needs based on the sensations of our body: hunger, thirst, cold, tired, warmth. Our third language is thinking and is speaking. And we've decided it's the most important one because that's what we've devoted everything to, because it's built such a great world around us. But we still have access to these other levels of language. And our first language that's consistently talking to us, whether we notice it or not, is sensation, inside of the body and outside of the body. So a saying, an axiom in polyvagal theory that I think is profoundly accurate, if not true for everybody, but accurate from very many people, is that state drives story, or story follows state. So when we hear a narrative in somatics of someone feeling something or thinking about something, we're not always invested in the actual content of the narrative. We're not actually invested in like trying to break apart thoughts. We're noticing the speed, the rapidity of thought, the language, the force of the voice. If the voice has prosody to it, which is going up and going down, or if it's kind of stuck in a certain vocal range. We're watching how shoulders tense or loosen, for instance, how eyes make contact or can't make contact. And then that starts to tell us about where a person is in their nervous system. So if someone's speaking rapidly and the tones may be a little bit angry or frustrated, that might tell us that they're in their fight system, in their nervous system. They're in a little bit of fight response. So from this level, if someone was to sit and tell me like, I don't feel confident, or like, I feel like I'm not good enough, this aspect isn't about trying to figure out thoughts, because we all have thoughts. We're all just thinking all the time. We're just thinking. We get curious about the thoughts, how they reflect into the nervous system, because your body never lies. It never lies. It might be stuck in a different point in time. If a person has a trauma physiology, a CPTSD physiology, anxiety, depression physiology, it might be stuck in a different point in time, but your body's never lying to you. So then we get curious about like, wow, you have this thought, like you're sort of noticing that, if the narrative is like, I don't feel good enough. And the question becomes, where do you feel that in your body? And in my practice, I do a lot of inner somatic focusing. It's a certain process taught by Jean Gendlin. And the question becomes me sending someone else's words back to them. So when I send your words back to you, what do you notice in your body? Sensing that you often don't feel good enough. Where do you feel that? And some people will be very close processors. So they might drop in and be like, ugh, when you said that back to me, or even when I said it, I feel it in my stomach. Like I feel sick. I feel nauseous in my stomach. And then we just notice that. Oh, like notice that you're feeling sick and nauseous in your stomach. That's interesting. What if we stayed with that for a minute? What if we attended to the sensation in your system? And when we start to unravel the importance of thoughts and start attending to the sensations might have a totally different story. The sensation could be historically based. It could be like, yeah, when I was like 8 years old in grade 3, I had a teacher who was really mean to me. That's what this reminds me of. Oh, now we have historical data. Oh, look when this might have started. They were 8 years old in grade 3 and they had a teacher tell them they weren't good enough. And their body is now carrying that memory. And from there's a variety of different processes, depending on the person, explorations, to start to unwind that part of them or resource that feeling that doesn't feel safe.
Whew, that's so beautiful. Even you explaining this back to me, and I think most people are sitting in themselves being like, well, when do I feel that way, right? And when do I feel that way? What do I feel? And when you're allowed to notice it, and instead of pushing it away, pretending it's not there, pretending that everything's okay, the toxic positivity we see in our society at times, what does it look like if we just notice it? What does it look like if that's okay to feel that way? And there's reasons for it. There's nothing good or bad, but just reasons.
Yeah, you've got it. The minute we start attending to internal sensations, if that's a person's process, because people will have different processes for this material. But if someone starts attending to the story, like let's say just in this example that someone's like, now they want to talk about when they were 8 years old in grade 3. We're not really interested in the narrative because we can't go back in time and change that moment. It's happened. But what's happening is that it's showing up right now. So when we go back and notice like, hey, there might be an aspect of you that's kind of a young kid that really felt unsafe and you can really feel it in your gut. What if you put your hand there or just your awareness and you just made contact with that part of yourself? Just letting that part know that had to fight for so long, feeling all by itself, let it know, I am with you. And something magical happens when people start to attend to these parts that they've been carrying for so long. All of a sudden they realize, like, yeah, I've been working needlessly really hard since I was a little kid. Oh yeah, I'm an adult now. I get to reform, I get to choose. And that's another piece of what I would consider embodied confidence, is knowing that you have choice.
Knowing that you have choice. I want to repeat that and sit with that a little bit. Knowing that you have choice. We can choose things that are around us. We can choose the people around us. We can set those boundaries around us. We can choose the situations that we're in. And I know that somatics and your experiencing is so different for every individual. So if an individual was interested in starting a somatic experience, what would that look like? What would the first step be?
What a great question. You could, here's the shameless promotion part, right?
Yeah.
Like you could go on YouTube and look up Mindful Somatic Wellness, StaceyMadden.com, my old website. And I have a couple of videos out with some practices explaining my approach and how I kind of go about it. Some of the most important somatic practices really are practices like yoga. It's one of the reasons, in my opinion, and it is just an opinion, why yoga has been so popular and has grown and grown and grown, is because it allows people the chance to settle their nervous system and to be embodied in a different way than just the rush and the grind of day-to-day life. They get to sit and breathe for about 50 minutes somewhat consciously and move their body in a way that might even, feel pleasurable and not necessarily have like an operation at the end of it. Like you will have bigger muscles at the end of this or, have an achievement point to it. But yeah, simple somatic practices, there's tons out there now on YouTube, on Instagram. I think there's a lot of people out there doing really, really great things. My only caveat around that would be is to look up a person's training and make sure that they're trauma informed. And anybody who's trauma informed and trained in trauma informed practices will have a pretty extensive knowledge of the nervous system, and they can hold space for people even online in a recording. So that would be the one caveat that I would tie for people who wanted to get started in it.
Amazing. And that word trauma informed, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, what does trauma informed mean to me? Trauma informed for me, that feels like a really big question. Really sort of starts with the ability to sit back and notice. There's that word again, right? To sit back, to hold a little bit of space, to let your awareness kind of spread out a little bit and notice that people are showing up exactly the way that they are and that there's no need to correct or fix anybody. But sometimes people will need a space or another person that they can rest into or use as a resource or receive as a resource. So fundamentally, trauma-informed, in its nuts and bolts kind of way, is some sort of training that informs people of the nervous system and the fight, flight, freeze, survival adaptations or responses in the system, or quote-unquote trauma responses. But I would even expand on that and say that trauma-informed also means a person who's able to sit back and collectively take in how society and how socially we've kept people stuck in those survival adaptations. So we start taking the onus off of the individual and start sitting back and noticing how corporations and businesses and capitalism has kind of oppressed people's nervous systems, keeping them stuck in fight, flight, and freeze. It's a micro view as well as a macro view of the nervous system.
And the intersectionalities of everything that creates us as whole humans. And in confidence, we sometimes talk about, we think that it's one small issue, right? But typically we're holistic humans and our mind, body, and soul are all one. And we can't just take them apart and hope that they're three different entities, because we are whole holistic humans who have whole holistic thoughts and feelings. And we need to experience that and different identities as well. We need to allow ourselves to be that. Now, I want to get a little bit into you and talk about how you got into somatics and why somatics really interested you and how you started Mindful Somatic Wellness, which is such a beautiful space for somatic experiencing in Calgary.
Oh, thanks a lot. I enjoy the space too. I'm glad you're enjoying it. It kind of depends on like how far back does a person go, right? I guess the ultimate somatic experience is that you are born, is that a person is embodied as a human, or, you know, maybe like a non-human too. There can be somatic practices with equine, horses, dolphins, cats, dogs, right? But for me, I would probably say the first time that I really, really felt something happen was when I was 19 years old, and I went to a yoga class here in Calgary. And this was, I'll totally date myself happily because this was way back in like maybe the early 90s, mid 90s. And there was no yoga clothes. There was no yoga studios even yet. I don't think the first one had opened up in Calgary. You just wore gym shorts, you brought a towel. You know, it was a sign stuck to like a lamp post, right? Taped up, and you took the number maybe and called someone and then signed up and brought a check or brought cash. And I went in and we did this practice that as a 19-year-old felt really boring. And I was familiar with yoga because my mom had practiced yoga and I'd read books on it when I was younger. But we did this practice and it felt really boring. Like, we sat on the floor on our towels and we stretched a little bit, and sometimes we put our legs up the wall. We tried to do splits, I remember, and we did handstands. And I was a very, very nubile 19-year-old. I could do all of it. Like, none of it was hard for me at that age. It'd be a different story now. And I left that practice, and it was on 17th Avenue, and it was above the framing store, and it was where the One Yellow Rabbit used to have their practice space. It was really cool. And I left, and I realized that I felt totally engaged with everything around me in a way that I hadn't experienced before to my knowledge or memory. So I remember watching raindrops fall and kind of hit a puddle, and I could really track like the rings in the puddle, and it looked really beautiful to me, just watching raindrop hit a puddle. And I noticed even back then that I felt very grounded, and yet I felt energized. Fundamentally, what I felt was safe. I had a regulated nervous system. I was in presence. I felt like I was embodied. These are all the words that I can use now, but at the time I didn't have words for it. And often with somatics, there are no words for it because it's a felt state. And I thought, well, that class is just magical. What the hell happened? Like, what happened? And I went back, and then I kind of stopped going, and then I jumped in and out of yoga for a long time. And then I went back after having children, and I really dove into becoming a yoga teacher and practicing and sharing the practice. And you know, when you're quite young and you have a moment where you feel embodied, you feel connected, you feel safe, your nervous system is regulated, and you don't have any of those words for it, it feels like magic. It absolutely feels like magic. And it can be easy to ascribe, whatever word we'd want to use for that, edit that one out, add it in later, something mystical and metaphysical on top of that. And yeah, maybe there is something metaphysical there when you feel sort of connected to something greater than yourself. But really fundamentally over the years, I peeled back a lot of the metaphysical studies around yoga practice that aren't even ours to begin with, quite frankly speaking. And in the middle of it was the nervous system. In the middle of it was the experience of being a human who sometimes is physiologically driven to be in a survival response. And yet, as an embodied human, is invited to be in something bigger. And that's where I sort of started jumping into somatics, like out of the world of yoga and into somatics. So I went to Edmonton and I spent a weekend in a somatics training as like a gift for me one time, where I'm like, oh, this will be mom's weekend away. I can't wait. I'm going to go and do the somatics practice. Let's see what this is about. And it blew my mind open. And after that point, yoga was forever in the rearview mirror for me, because I thought I knew how to move my body. I thought I knew how to inhabit my body. And I realized that I didn't. I realized that I had trained my body to experience a yoga practice, but I hadn't invited my nervous system to be a part of the experience. It just happened to be a result at the end of it, unknowingly. So in this somatics practice, we moved really slow. We did little tiny movements. We did before and after testing. We did little feathering movements. It wasn't a blow your mind, cathartic experience. It was little tiny pieces of sensing how your body feels different. And I would go back to my hotel room every night and lay in the bathtub and cry. Mm-hmm. Cry and cry, because I was like, oh my God, I didn't know that I was actually stuck, because we can be unconsciously stuck in our body in places, emotionally too. And that really kickstarted my journey into doing embodied somatic practices, because it was mind-blowing to see how slow, attentive movement can shift your nervous system into a place where you actually feel like you're in yourself and you can move easier. Your movement becomes fluid and smooth. So none of these rungs on the ladder, none of these survival adaptations are bad. They're really, really good. They're what we've actually inherited from our ancestors. We are the descendants of the scared people. Nobody likes to hear that, but it's the truth. We're the descendants of ancestors who learned to run away first. And then maybe they had to fight. And then maybe they had to hide by going really, really still or shutting down, right? None of these are bad. They've saved our life over and over again. What we're looking at in somatics is noticing if the volume is accurate and proportional to the event at hand. So we're not trying to make these go away. We're trying to get intelligent and curious about them. And that will take us back to safe and social. In our brains, we are wired. We're hardwired in our nervous system and our body to be in the fight, flight, freeze, high tone shutdown state. It's the Autobahn. It's immediate, it's fast, there's a lot of information, we can get on it, we don't know how to get off of it very easily. Safe and social presence, that's like a deer path in the forest. You just happen to find yourself on it and you're like, this is great, I should come here more often. How did I find this again? And we're trying to actually rewire more of that pathway of safe and social. If you think about this, Dana's idea of this ladder, right? If you think about like these little rungs on a ladder, you might even think about little light switches beside them. And every time we go down a rung, a little light switch in our brain turns off. Click, 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 click. So when we kind of go into that, distressed state of curling in and looking down towards the ground, maybe we're not even hearing them very accurately anymore. This is when memory starts to get really confused for people with a trauma physiology. They don't remember the event, and that's because their brain saved them. Their brain turned off so that they didn't have to remember it. And there's a lot of emotions in there.
Yeah, and the reason why I've loved getting to know you and learning more about what you do in somatic experiencing is because it's very similar to what I do, but just in a body response. And I hear all of the same things, right, that you talk about, those boundaries, right? Finding a space where we can, not think about those negative thoughts as often, but it provides a totally different way of doing it in a way that might feel better for certain people, right? So do you want to take us through a little exercise about maybe how we can get back up to that safe and social? Maybe if we're feeling a little bit in that fight or flight.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll share with you some essential somatics or somatics pieces, and they're red light and green light reflex. Now, these practices I share with pretty much everybody, and there's a couple of things to consider as we do these practices. One, you move really slow. Really slow. And not because slow is good, just everybody needs to slow down and the world moves too fast, although all of that is true. But because slow is data rich. When we start to slow down our awareness through slower movement, we start to notice what we're skipping over. We start to notice maybe what becomes habituated in the body. So slow movement, taking a big break between movements. I call it a big scoop of nothing. Just taking a big scoop of nothing, letting your brain actually notice and rewire what you just did with your body, nice and slow. And then letting yourself notice a before and an after. So the brain loves to compare. It loves comparing, up and down, left and right, black and white. In somatics, we do more of what the brain wants to do, which seems counterintuitive, but you'll see when we do the practices how helpful it can be. These practices, I would recommend if you notice something from them that feels beneficial to you, that you practice them a little bit and often. And we're not waiting for the big events to bring these practices into play. Because when we are in the big events, when our boundaries have been really pushed against, our brain is turned off, click, 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 and we're back in survival. So if we can start to embody these next reflexes that I'll show you, when we feel safe, when we actually feel safe, our brain will remember that and we'll come back to it more and more without having to work at it.
Beautiful. Well, I encourage you who are watching, who are listening, to get prepared, and we're going to be taking through a little somatic exercise.
Yeah, let's just do a little one.
Beautiful.
So if you are seated, and it doesn't matter where you're seated, if you're on a chair, if you're on the floor, if you're in your car at work as you listen to this podcast, or if you're at home, just notice how you're seated, and you might give your body a little wiggle, a little shake out. You might bring some awareness just to your breathing. You don't have to slow it down. Just notice your breathing. Notice that when you notice your breathing, it'll slow down. When you become aware of your own breathing, it naturally will want to slow down or move in a more comfortable way. In somatics, we're not interested in always having to enforce belly breath, because belly breath isn't necessarily helpful for some people. So the beautiful part of somatics is you get to show up exactly the way you are in your physiology, trusting that it's trying to do something for you if we're paying attention to it. Less correction, more connection. Trademark, Stacey Madden, mindfulsomaticwellness.com. So here you are seated now. And just notice the curves of your spine. So bring awareness to the curves of your spine. We've got kind of like a natural curve to our low back, right? I'm going to take you through something that's called green light reflex, or in some systems it's called arch. So what you begin to do, and you can have your hands by your side, is you begin to really slowly arch your back. So you arch your back, you might spin your arms away from you, drawing your shoulders onto your back, and your chin might come down. So move nice and slow, you're just arching your spine. And don't let anything hurt. If anything starts to hurt, back away, do less. Less is more in somatics. We've all learned through enough pain. So just take your time and notice that you've arched your spine. Are your feet coming up off of the floor? Are you starting to lift up and out of your body? Notice your breathing again. Are you holding your breath? And can you just invite some conscious breathing? And then notice how hard you're working here. Notice how strong you are. The back line of your body is gathering itself up to push you forward. So this is reflective in a very generalized way of fight and flight. It's when the back line of our body wants to push us forward to run or to hold ground. So take a couple of breaths here. Is it available or possible to thank this reflex in your system? Is that okay for you to be like, hey, it's really cool. My body knows how to push me into a way to run away or fight? And then very, very, very slowly, because you're so curious about how this feels, you begin to let go. You just begin to notice how your body wants to come out of this. You allow your body to just dissolve any tension along your spine. Really slowly, we get curious. Is it more your left side, your right side? Do your hips go first or your back? But you just let everything slowly slide back to something a little more functional, a little more neutral, and you rest in this functional neutral. So when your brain tells you you're done, keep letting your body unwind, because your body might have more to let go of. And here's another neat way to start to explore how our brain tells us something, but our body is saying something else. So let your body just continue to slowly let go of that arch in your back. There might even be finer layers of tension that want to dissolve now that you're allowing it. And then land in your sit bones again, land in your legs again, feel the chair. And then just rest here. You might even lean back and receive some more support from the chair or the floor. And then it's just a couple of breaths here. Just noticing. Green light reflex causes a lot of tension along the back line of the body. So all of the muscles along the spine pull in to push you forward. Sometimes we'll see green light reflex in the Achilles tendon, in tension in the calf muscles, a lot of neck and shoulder tension, eye tension as well. So the optical nerve gets pretty tight. Sometimes even our scalp gets tight. It's a very, very deeply ingrained mammalian response in the system. So we practice that in a really big way. But it could be very, very subtly held in the body. It could be very subtle layers of that response to push or run. So green light reflex. Now we're going to move into a red light reflex, which is akin to a shutting down response. So what might happen, and you might follow my cue just depending how it works for you, but move really, really slowly because we're getting curious. Notice your belly button maybe, and then begin to pull your belly button back, and then your shoulders roll in, and then you slowly roll yourself forward. Your shoulders might roll in, your hands might roll in, and you're giving yourself kind of a squeeze along the front line of your body. If we were laying on the floor, your head might move differently than if you're seated, but don't worry too much about that. Now you're letting yourself fold all the way in. When you allow yourself to fold in, hang out there and notice if you've decided to hold your breath. And if you have, you just get curious. You're like, wow, look at that. I noticed I hold my breath. And then you invite a couple of comfortable breaths. And you get curious about how your breathing feels when you're holding yourself inward. Initially, this reflex might feel really comfortable. It might feel good after that green light reflex. But notice the longer you hold it, how much work you're doing to shut down. There's a lot of work involved for a human to pull inward and curl around ourselves. This reflex is trying to protect the soft front side of our body. So, if a predator was attacking us, we would curl in so that they couldn't get to our vital organs. You might even notice some emotions that can arise as you curl yourself in. You might notice, does this body posture actually allow you to feel connected, safe, or confident? Like maybe for some people, right? We don't know, but you might get curious about your own emotional response to holding your body like this. So red light reflex is this generalized exploration of how a body wants to curl in to protect and shut down. Can you send some gratitude to it? Is it available to you to say like, wow, thanks body, you're pretty cool. You know how to save me in this direction? Maybe yes, maybe no. And then when you're ready, you just slowly let go. And you get really curious about how your body wants to really slowly take you out. You know, a lot of people want to pull out pretty fast, and that's okay, but we're just noticing when you think you're done being pulled out of that red light reflex, give your body some more time, because your brain might think you're finished and want to jump on to the next thing. Remember that Autobahn? But allow your body to really show how it can let go of the tightness and the held response along the front line. So there's red light reflex, and then you might settle back and receive some support from the chair again. So these reflexes, we're inviting ourselves to feel them. We're not trying to go the opposite direction. So if we're slumped forward over our desk, we have a lot of technology that keeps us in something akin to a red light reflex. To reset the body, sometimes we'll go like, oh, I need to stretch out like that, right? And that's fine because we're sort of like pulling on our fascia and our muscles. But in somatics, especially in this form, what we're doing is we're noticing, again, becoming aware that we have inherent reflexes to save us. And instead of trying to pull ourselves in the opposite direction, we follow and trust the system and it's trying to take us somewhere. And then we get really curious about how we're in it. We choose to go into the responses. And then we get really curious about how we can come back out. So we reverse engineer survival responses by actually moving into them instead of away from them. Nice and slow. And these are pretty safe places to start with trauma responses: green light reflex, red light reflex.
Thank you so much for sharing. Whenever I do that, what I really felt was the ability to, and actually was, as soon as you said come out of it, I popped right out, right? That's what you're supposed to do. And then allowing myself to be like, well, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay if I'm sitting here. Maybe it's okay if I slowly do this. Maybe I don't have to. And in this situation, maybe I don't have to get right back on the microphone and ask you a question, right? Maybe I can just come out of that and allow some time, right? So thank you so much for sharing that. That was so, so beautiful. Now, I have a couple kind of rapid questions for you about confidence and bringing it back to our body. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, golly, that's a great. Okay, the best piece of advice that I ever received was the invitation by a somatic experiencing trainer who I trained with. And the invitation was to work less. And it just blew my mind because I was unconsciously working so hard. And the invitation was, what if you worked less at this? And it just pivoted my entire perspective. So I would share that with so many people. What happens when you work less hard at just showing up?
Thank you for sharing that answer. The next question I have for you, what is the worst piece of advice you've ever received?
Oh, wow, really? Oh my gosh, what is the worst piece of advice that I've ever received? Oh no, I'm having to really think about like bad advice. I don't know.
That's great. So you haven't got bad advice.
I must be feeling really regulated today, and I'll tell you why. Because if I was in a more dysregulated state, I think that my brain would offer through a lot of things that might have really triggered like a fight or a flight response in my system. But because I'm feeling more safe and social today and regulated, it's not top of mind. So if I'm actually even looking at these questions through the lens of state follows story, I don't have a story for that because I'm not in that state.
And doesn't that bring it full circle into confidence and when we can change the mindset, which is what we hear often, which I think is a fantastic principle of thought work and changing our mindset. But by also changing our body, we also have the same outcome, right?
Well, yeah, like a person can continually try to work through mindset. They can try to change narrative within their brain. But if their nervous system is stuck in a trauma response, it's not going to be permanent. It won't be deeply felt, and it'll probably be really hard for them. If they're in a safe and social body set, then their mind will reflect that, and they'll have more neural platform. So if somebody is working through a lot of like CPTSD physiology, and they're just trying to change how they think about things, that's like self-gaslighting. But it is, in a way, it's trying to tell someone that their experience is different than how they're experiencing it. And if their nervous system, if their body is still telling a story from 20 years ago, it's very real. It's very real. It's like with the physios down the hallway when they're like, who do you work with? Like, what do you do over there? Because they see that I do pelvic floor stuff. I'm like, I'm the person that people come to when they go and see you a bunch of times and it only works when they're in the office with you, and then they can't continue to keep up the same strength when they're at home, or they can't even access the muscles because they don't have access to their body safely. You can't change what you're not aware of. You can try to think your way out of it. If we could think our way out of not being confident, none of us would ever be there in the first place. It's the same with anxiety and depression. If we could think our way out of anxiety and depression, none of us would ever have anxiety and depression. We're expert thinkers. We're already expert thinkers. We're not expert feelers.
Beautiful. That was such a great answer. Thank you. Now, Stacey, what is the most important thing?
In the world?
You tell me. What's the most important thing?
Okay, so I'm just going to empty my body. That's a little Ram Dass practice. When he was asked big questions, he would just empty and then see what floated up. Curiosity. Being curious. Because I think curiosity actually sparks a lot of interest, exploration, connection, and maybe ultimately feeling confident.
Beautiful.
That's a great question.
Well, with that, thank you so dearly, Stacey, for speaking with us today. I really wanted to bring you in to talk about how confidence can look so different for every different person, which is why I named the podcast Confidence Redefined, right? It isn't a one size fits all. It isn't one thing will work for another person. And I think somatics is a really cool option to talk about what's happening in the body. If you feel like I just can't get there, I feel stuck. Some of the things that are being told is really affecting the way that my body feels. So I want to invite anybody who is looking for more support with somatic experiencing to check out Mindful Somatic Wellness. This is actually the beautiful space that we are in today. Stacey does workshops as well as one-on-one experiencing, and really provides such beautiful access to people in Calgary and virtually all over Canada and the States if you'd like as well. So thank you so much, Stacey, for joining us today, and thank you for sharing us through that guidance.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it so much, and it's always so good to get curious with you.
Mwah.